out to me about probably like 6 months ago and said, hey, I would love to have you talk. I think you guys used the book. Okay, so they used the book. And the book was written, the book on mobile user experience was written after a talk I gave in 2010 to the Boston Human Interface Group, or the Boston Chi. And they encouraged me and said, we really love what's going on in the industry. Can you give a talk about what's happening with mobile user experience? And this was 2010. That felt like a lifetime ago. And the publisher reached out to me and said, could you take that talk and put it into a book? And it's funny because this is now, the lecture today and the workshop tomorrow is a refresh on that conversation. Because the world has changed tremendously from where we were in 2010 and where a lot of that research had come in from 2007 to the book that was 2013 to where we are right now in 2016. So I call it Hello, My Name is Mobile because it's a reintroduction. You know, if you were in a networking group and you were to meet someone, the little tags help figure out, you know, a little bit about them, but now let's get into the details of who they are and what they're doing and what's exciting. A little bit about me. This is even an update since the last time I think there's a little intro for me on the book, and it's even completely like outdated. So even since I was writing that book, I've actually co-founded 2 startups in the mobile technology space, and mostly completely focused on getting data off mobile devices and what to do with it. Everything from if the phone is moving to the types of apps on there to really kind of drill into what sensor data you could pull from it and what we could do with it. And so because of that, I've actually started my career much earlier in mobile in about 2000 with handsets, and not only that, but PDAs. So I'm really familiar with what happened in that world before, working on software, and then where we ended up now, where we're kind of, you know, I like to say history repeats itself from a lot of things. So I've worked with a lot of experience design for a lot of big brands, everything from an international airport to a campaign for an orange juice that I've never drunk, down to everything from data to financial services. And really our goal now is, can we make experiences better? Everything from the desktop to the phone that's in our pocket to what we're doing, it really is about better experiences. And so I hope that's our goal from today to tomorrow, is talking about how all of this, everything from interface to interaction, affects those experiences. Because at the end of the day, I tell developers and technologists, it doesn't matter what your stack is, what code you write in, you know, what IP you have on your code and algorithms. If the user experience of that customer isn't amazing, the rest of it is a failure. And it doesn't matter like how much money you put into it. It really is about doing it right. So again, that's a little bit me. Here's that wonderful book that you guys know. I'm very proud of it because I know I actually got to do the illustration for the cover. That's it. That's my big one. Yay. Okay, so here's what we'll talk about today. We're going to talk about a brief history of mobile, where mobile is now, how to make a case for mobile, because even now, there's still a lot of conversations of why mobile devices, why tablets. And it's amazing that in 2016 that conversation is still happening. And it changes, which is good, but it's a different conversation. And then more importantly, who are those users and behaviors about them? And then sort of how do we get ready for it? How do, if you are going to design a project around it, if you are going to start thinking about developing in mobile, how do you get there? And there's a couple of simple steps that I have. So here's our brief history of mobile. And this is because, I mean, for most of you guys, I think most of you guys probably weren't born in 1994. I don't know who was born in 1994.
I was 2.
Okay, you were 2, so you don't remember a device without a browser. More than likely not. So back then in 1994, there were these things called cell phones. And most of their life had existed just dialing numbers with LED screens or LCD screens if we were lucky. But in 94, you know, this is really the pivotal moment, is that a web browser was installed, which is a very, very basic version of the browser. In my brief history, I really don't care about the technology or the IP. It's really about that access to information. And it was going away from voice to data. And that's, I think, a critical piece of this conversation. And in 96, we had the personal desktop assistant, and that had its reign of terror until the early 2000s, when so many PDAs were pretty much tied to the selling of PCs and personal computers that when PC sales dipped, so did PDAs. But even though there were actually PDAs beforehand, the power of this PDA, of let's say the Palm OS, was the ability of syncing. And that was critical, the sort of taking a capture of data and syncing it over. But the real main amazing thing is that for some PDAs, there was an actual a full web browser on it. And not really a full web browser, this is what was referred to as web clipping, which is the backend would take a snapshot of that page, give it to you, then get rid of it, and then give you the next snapshot of the next page. So it was constantly saving a little bit of a web page, like a trickle, down into yourself. Think of it as, someone throws a bunch of water at you and it's coming trickle by a trickle by a trickle, and that's how you're viewing the web. And then there was, the MP3 player revolution in 2001, where what began to happen here was something really, really important, which was beginning to add interfaces to things that weren't buttons. Beginning to use, non-conservative / I would say inverted L navigation that the web was used to with more motion. The wheel, the clicking, some at least feedback that was being returned to it. And that was critical because it began to teach the user and the consumer that an interface could be something other than a series of 4 buttons on the screen with an up and a down arrow. Is that we can begin to relate the idea of human touch and human interface into UI. And even between there, this is what I refer to as the ultimate mobile mashup, which is in 2007, and this is what became of the smartphone, is we just took all of these pieces and put them together. And part of what you have to understand is a lot of the technology that went into the smartphone had existed 10, 15 years before. It wasn't like it just showed up and magically it was amazing. It actually, pieces of it were scattered all over. I remember early 2000s meeting some of the UX team at BlackBerry. It was like 2005. And they said, well, you know what? We have users that spend over 20 minutes on our devices. And people looked at it and said, well, that was amazing. And it wasn't that they were actually spending 20 minutes of usage, is that the experience was so terrible that they would spend 20 minutes of that terrible experience trying to actually get somewhere. So you have to take a lot of these stats that I talked to you about a grain of salt. Because again, it wasn't a great experience, it was a bad experience, but people kept on beating their heads against the wall to make an experience work. So that by the time we got to here, there's a couple of amazing things that happened. One, all right, a music player, so what? A camera, so what? That had existed before, even on small phones, flip phones. Yeah, a phone, well, that was the entire point of a smartphone. But the power was a full web browser. It wasn't web. It wasn't web clipping. It was a web browser that you saw on your desktop. And not a great web browser. It was still very limited, but it was a full web browser. It still had an ability to have a cache. It had an ability for it to run JavaScript. It had an ability to run parallel and concurrent connections, which is the number of page elements that you could download in a page, which is really amazing. And the most, I think, the next 3 amazing things that came up for it was, one, there was access to the internet 24/7. I was talking to one of the grad students about the magic about that is that AT&T decided, and this is more of in the States, that they would give unlimited web access and unlimited bandwidth. They've spent the next 20 years trying to get rid of that, and actually the next 10 years, they've been trying to get rid of everyone on there, because they realized that they actually ended up losing money, because it was a device that was 24/7, and people began to use it so much that it was actually clogging the data lines. So little by little, they've been trying to entice people. Say, we'll give you a free phone. Please get off our unlimited data because you're killing us. And I've heard of multiple guys and people in AT&T say, yeah, this was the worst decision we've ever made. What it brought to the table was also complex touch gestures. Not as simple as an iPod that was a click and a turn, but a second, 2-second swipes, haptics, which were important, which had actually existed before. I remember in late 90s, early 2000s, looking at haptic interfaces at SIGGRAPH, and they just not being cooked enough. But they're here. And more than that, they were based on an icon-based interface, which, if you think about where the phone was, it was lists and menus. So the fact that there was a visual interface was very, very important. And then the floodgates opened of apps. This bite-sized experience that literally has been billions and billions of downloads, to the point that Apple said, we're going to focus on apps and we're just going to shut Flash down, which was the Macromedia's and Adobe's, version of 3D animation tool to build applications. They said, we're going to get rid of it. This is our focus right here. And it's still going. And billions of users later, it keeps on going. I mean, it doesn't mean that we have amazing things that have come out of it. It just means that there's piles and piles of stuff. So, what else? I think these are the two important things that came out of it. For anyone in design, for anyone in development, multiple phones and multiple operating systems, to tablets that were just bigger phones and bigger operating systems. And the equation began to get more complex and more complex and more complex. And then we ended up coming back to the MP3 player that was just like an iPhone, but without the phone. So history repeats itself. We end up going back to an MP3 player. So there's an amazing ability that we've seen this world. And that was, I think, the world 2013, 2014. So let's roll it back to the next years. And this is what I refer to as mobile now. And in the last 2 years, there has been this amazing conversation with the design and technology and mobile about the apps versus mobile web debate. Who do you choose? You are either on the mobile app camp or you're on the mobile web camp. And it was, think of it as, it was like apples and oranges. And there is a winner now. Whether it's a good winner or a bad winner, it doesn't matter. And part of what the mobile web became really kind of a competitor was, it said we're going to use the concept of responsive web design, meaning web design that is flexible, dynamic enough to change as devices came on board, as tablets came on board, as signage came on board. And you have an entire camp of people like Jason Grigsby writing about how to add retina display for mobile web pages, and writing about the power of adaptive design and responsive design to make the mobile web, less of a second-class citizen to now a player. But what this fight ended up doing is it focused on how amazing it was to work in mobile as a platform. And what ended up happening was responsive web design is it's now a standard. There was no winner, there was literally a standard. And now it is a de facto standard to any website. If it doesn't have a responsive mobile design side, it's failure. So now every kid in high school, every kid in college, every professional is being told you have to add a mobile or a site onto your existing site using the same code base. But why did it fail? And the failure is, and I touched about this early on in 2013 because it was starting to ramp up, is there were very limited APIs to the hardware. Mobile is only amazing until you connect it to the hardware, until you get access to the camera, to the accelerometer, and everything that's mobile first. Because if not, it's just a screen with a little picture of a web page. That doesn't make mobile amazing. It's the rest of the stuff. It's usage to haptics, it's usage to interface, it's usage to even the storage on the device, it's usage to the location. That never really got cooked. It's also responsive is hard to set up for existing sites. And the other equation was slow load times. You have a 2 megabyte website, it's also a 2 megabyte mobile site. That's just the math. And you could do all these tricks, and Jason probably would, if he ever saw this, would probably call me up and yell at me and say, no, 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 that's not the equation, it's different. But not everyone sets it up in an amazing way. So what did the app give us that inherently, I hate to say it, that's the winner? One, access to the mobile hardware. Access to the GPU. I can make things run faster, I can use a camera, location, storage, accelerometer, I can use haptics, I can connect it to a watch, I can do anything I want to it. And I have access to all whatever the device can give me. That's why it's the winner. Because I can make an experience that's amazing and fast and is able to touch into augmented reality and use the camera and use to try different things. And there is also within the development platforms for Android and iOS the concept of a universal app. You make an app that works across everything with the same code base that you're working on, which was, a loving concept stolen from responsive web design, but now works. You have push notifications, an ability of getting engagement to yourself that the mobile web doesn't have. You have accessibility, so now you actually can, the OS itself can increase boldness of text size, can do, all these amazing things just because you're on the device. And then there's a level of discoverability from the App Store. I forgot to put on there one of the other things that kind of put the nail on the coffin of responsive web design was an ability that when you go to a mobile web page on a phone, it gives you a link to say download the app from here, which is in-app communication. And that's the other power, is apps can talk to other apps. Apps can send you into a deep link of another app, kind of like a mobile web page would work. So we got the best of both worlds. Yet, remember, the top reason apps get denied from the App Store, and this was a blog post put up a year ago by Apple, is substandard user interface. So what does that tell us? That first amazing thing of guidelines and UI guidelines, they're important. They're critical. Because if not, you will get kicked off the App Store. Again, there are rules to playing in someone's pool, and you have to follow them or you get kicked out. I can tell you the number of people who get kicked out because, well, you didn't put the navigation in the right place. You didn't put the button in the right place. We gave you the rules and guidelines, follow them. If not, you get to get kicked out. And again, I like it when they just, before pre-2013, it was a magical mystery thing. You go to the mystery ball and say, how long will it take? What's going to happen? Yeah, I don't know who's going to review it. Now it's a pretty set process. You have 7 to 10 days. You get a push notification of when it's being reviewed. You get a push notification of when it's being approved. You get a push notification of when it's being denied. And by the way, here's literally, we're just going to tell you common app rejections. So by the way, figure this stuff out. And if you get denied, well, you brought that on yourself. I mean, that doesn't mean you can't do still amazing things. I mean, I've done things that were pushed to the App Store that even I would have said, this should never go to the App Store. And not only that, Google introduced guidelines. And that was critical, because before, Google said you could submit whatever you want, you could do whatever you want, and it ended up creating a flood of literally people abusing the system, which were flashlight apps that were also doing things like if you clicked a certain button, it would also find a way to hack into your phone. Viruses that would pretend to be a Chase bank application and would use it to phish other information. Flashlight apps that would allow you to, even though they weren't flashlight app, would allow you to actually create your phone into a modem for an AT&T phone. And AT&T said, no, get rid of that stuff. There were so many people literally pushing apps to the market, pretending to be other companies, pretending to be brands, and actually injecting viruses into the Android phone. So that same amazing flexibility began to close. and doing things like now in the Android programming environment, every app has to have a signature, which has to come from a development environment that has to be signed by a real person, that has to have a key to show that there's a secure environment. And not only that, which happened last year, is there's now an approval process. I know I've been kicked off the Android store more times than I can count. And it was just because all sorts of reasons. That's a conversation for another day. And again, there was never an approval process. Now there is. And it's random, and you don't know when it's going to happen to you, and then you will get a nasty gram that says you were kicked off the market years at this point. But there's no place to tell you, actually, what are the guidelines for getting kicked off the market. And so, not related to you guys, but in the States, years ago in the world of the web, we used to call the beginning of 1998 the Wild Wild West of the internet. And still, for mobile, we called it the Wild Wild West in 2013. No rules. Anyone could do whatever they want. Literally, all that is being closed up. And so we're saying bye-bye to that era of mobile as being something lawless to mobile as now being fairly defined. Again, we have approval processes. We have UI guidelines. We have set IDEs to edit code and create applications. And even though the world is still changing, but we're getting to a more refined part of it. And this happened in the web as well. This happened in early 2000s when we went away from that lawlessness of anyone could write a web page to finally putting a set of things of that, and creating the world of user experience and information architecture that we know now. Again, very lawless in the late 90s. So where do we go next? This is what I refer to as mobile next. And what's happening in 2015, 2016 is the smart TV. And not only the smart TV, I don't care if I want to watch Netflix or Hulu, I really don't care. That's not important. It's now the putting of applications and content on the TV. So now you could actually write an app in Xcode, and you could push it to the watch and a tablet and a phone. You can also push that same Xcode app to the TV. So that's something that's starting to happen now, is now being able to push apps there, be able to, take streaming content, be able to use this hardware as an interface to apply your own personal content. Wearables as well. We went from dumb little sensors like an Up24 or a Fitbit to now complex sensors. And things like watches that would now display user interface to, there's a company in Boston called Whoop that does a continuous monitoring. Think of it as Up24 or a Fitbit on crack. It does monitoring in seconds, every second, to predict what would happen with you, or are you getting dehydrated. So the amount of data that can come over Bluetooth is amazing. The amount of data that can get passed to an Apple Watch to push notifications and now drive content to the user away from the phone is amazing. The Samsung watches that now have their own data plan to replace your mobile device and put it on your wrist. And then the rest of the ridiculous sensors that are, running goggles to gloves to a little piece that goes here for heart rate is really where this is going. And to take it even further, this is what we refer to as the Internet of Things, where it is all about the sensor and all about the information that it captures and the interaction between the sensor and the cloud, or the sensor and mobile, and there might not be any user interface at all. You could tell if the concrete is getting over frozen, if the HVAC is not working and all of a sudden something's going to happen to the materials. They might even predict when a fire is about to happen. And at the end of the day, after that construction, the sensor's dying, you throw them away. There's another company doing the same thing for concrete. The sensor actually gets put into concrete as it cures to actually measure the temperature, and then it dies. It's a little sensor this big. And it tells you whether or not the concrete is strong enough to finish construction. It's great. This is really where the power of that ability of taking in pounds and pounds and pounds of data So let's talk about making the case for mobile, which is one of my favorite things. And I like this slide because it's like, no shame. It's a big deal. Yeah. I used to show a slide that said, okay, the first time I started these presentations, I would show a slide that says, oh my God, look at this growth curve. Yeah, we got that. Really, everyone in this room has a mobile device. If not just one, they probably have 3 tablets at home, 2 mobile devices, and you change it out every year. Yeah, I get it. And then the next slide I started showing, which was, yeah, mobile's a big deal, but how about we look at the growth of data plans in the world? And now you have, again, roll the clock back early 2000s, late 90s, I traveled in Argentina, and you would have internet cafes. I don't think you guys have anyone ever seen an internet cafe? Okay, maybe a few of you in maybe third world countries, but you would go, you'd rent out a computer, and then you'd have chat with your friends while you were on an internet cafe, and they were in an internet cafe, and they might be a block down the street, they might be a kilometer down the street. I can't tell you the number of places that just doesn't exist anymore. It used to be like that in the early 2000s in Japan, where you would have internet cafes. All that's gone. It's just on your phone. So yes, it's a big deal because it's everywhere. First world, second world, third world. There are entire countries that have skipped 3G and 4G phones and went online right into LTE. Now, they skipped the whole, terrible marketing of why phones are better than other phones and this and that. It just doesn't exist. It's all LTE. And what's really the big deal is the access to the internet 24/7. So this is a project, if you guys haven't seen, which is pretty amazing. And this is out of Facebook's research lab. And they are building drones that are massive wingspans to deliver Wi-Fi into third world countries. Literally continuous automated drones that have a humongous wingspan that can circle around a country and bounce Wi-Fi onto the ground below from satellites. So Africa, India, anywhere in the world that can just keep this drone solar powered and flying continuously. What happens? The gap of access of information just goes away. Are you on a cell phone plan? Are you not? Can you afford it? Do you have top-up cards? Let me just connect to Facebook's Wi-Fi. And why is that important for them? Because it gets more people on Facebook. Google is running another project like this to try to do hot air balloons with Wi-Fi as well. Because the ability of creating continuous conversations around the world, it is all about making the world flat. And again, it's the access of information. But let me bring it down back here into having a conversation about why it's important. And perceptions have changed. Other than being like, oh, it's, in early 2010, I can tell you the number of retailers who have billions of dollars had said mobile was a toy. And then the same person that told me that 6 months later, eating his words and panicking and saying, holy carp, they're showing up. I don't know what to do. And the perception is now changed to half the customers say, if you have a site or a mobile app that doesn't load, they won't go back. And originally, we had a couple of stats in early 2003, 2006 for social that said, if I had a bad experience on my mobile, on the website, I won't go back to a physical store. And all of a sudden, this is now really, really hitting home because you're on the tablet. You're shopping at home, you're shopping in front of the TV, and you say, I hate this brand. You know what, I'm not going to shop there anymore. Their website is terrible. And here's another one. 48% of users say that if the mobile site isn't working well, it just means that the company doesn't care. They don't care. They don't care anything about it. And this is what retailers and brands are panicking about. And half of them are saying, well, I've got a website, is that enough? I've got a mobile website, and it's like, that's not enough. Because the expectation is so high to everyone here in this room that it has to be an amazing customer experience. Not just a great one, an amazing one. And then I bring it back to user experience. That customer experience that says, for every dollar you invest in user experience, you get $100 back. And it's real. I can't tell you, I just talked to a company who had raised about $12 billion in funding, and they didn't have a mobile experience. And they're working with small businesses. And I was like, no, you guys not. And they were like, we don't know what to do. They're like, really? Because it's 2016, and I can put some slides around you, and they're still like, well, let's talk to that customer first. And I was like, okay. Again, stats like that are important. There's still people out there that still don't believe you and don't believe me. So let's get to talk about those mobile users, because this is what's changed. And I'm not going to pick on anyone, I'm just going to be realistic on what I've seen. So the issue with mobile users is their behaviors are different than desktop users, than social users. And this is what is really amazing about them, and this is what these next couple of slides are going to talk about. Is for one, this is our challenge. And this is a challenge for anyone working on software, hardware, anyone working on experiences or technology, is trying to figure out how to solve these challenges. Because these are the challenges that people throw millions of dollars at to try to figure out. How do you solve them? And so we'll go to challenge number one is that the users are different. Very different. And not only do users define, oh, I'm on an iPhone or an Android, they actually have traits to them. Like, iPhone users are predominantly women. They use retail heavily a lot more. They spend more. An iPhone user is likely to spend 10 to 20 times more than an Android user. And they're focused more on US, Canada. Android is heavily male, heavily gamers, they spend less, and it's more international. And we're not even talking, and these are just the happy stats. We're talking about, if you're talking about income divide, that's not even in here. iOS, higher income, if you're trying to attract lower income customers, they're Android. Just without a doubt. And the difference is, that's a $200, $400 phone, that's a free phone or a $50 phone. And so we begin to see some basic stats begin to define themselves out. And they're just very difficult to categorize. But this is what we see from the retailers. So now, if you ask a retailer, who do you want to target? They say, I want here. Why? They spend more. If you ask a gaming platform, like Unity or any of the platforms that are focused on it, they say, we want to go here. Because this crowd not only is heavily engaged, guess what? They also probably own a tablet, they probably own a console, they probably also play video games somewhere else. So let's focus on that. And this is the important thing, is that the experiences need to be bite-sized. We went so much and so many people fail trying to put an entire desktop experience on a phone when it needs to be like this. This is the amuse-bouche, the beautiful little tasting thing. You go to a nice restaurant and it's filling and it's wonderful. That's a mobile experience. It needs to be amazing. It needs to get them coming back. And that's all a mobile experience should be. And time again, this is what shows that it's successful. And a watch experience, think of it as like a little pea. It's just enough to like, or a little nut where you throw back and you're like, oh, that's good, I'll have another one. Oh, that's good. And your full dinner is the desktop or tablet experience. And so the other thing that's different is a concept that's come up of perusal versus purpose-driven. Perusal on that side, purpose on this side. And what I mean from that is perusal is you pick up your phone, you pick up a tablet to play on it. You pick it up to look at information, but you might not buy on your phone. You might actually go to your desktop, your laptop, and buy there. And this is why the world of, if someone were to ask why Apple TV, is you look at the amount of time people spend on their TV. Much higher than it is on any of these devices. So you might want to buy in your TV. Hence, this new push to focus on smart TVs and push content and experience to them. Because really one of the things that happened that we saw is that there wasn't a clear division. And this was why in the early 2011 to 2013, when I was talking to retailers, a lot of them would say, well, sorry, our sales are coming from the desktop, but we have all these mobile customers, but they're not buying. And they are buying, but they're looking on the phone, and then they're going to the desktop or the tablet buying there. And so it's not just about a single experience, it's about a multi-screen experience. And that's critical, is that a single user will own multiple devices, will use multiple apps all across an entire experience. It happens tremendously. But it's so hard to categorize where that person's actually going to buy something